Hello and welcome to today's webinar, Leaders, Standard Work, and Personal Development Plans. At this point, I'd like to introduce your speaker for today. Randy Yust is the co-owner and manager of Beyond Benchmarks LLC, which is a consulting company that focuses on helping companies understand their work and improve processes with the use of industrial engineering tools and techniques and continuous improvement discipline to assure that their clients have the right resources at the right place at the right time. Some of the areas in which Beyond Benchmarks works include healthcare, hospitality, manufacturing, technology, and professional services. The principals of the company have personal work experience in such diverse companies such as Disney, large and small manufacturing companies, a large academic health center, as well as small and medium-sized hospitals and revenue cycle operations. Randy was introduced to these tools and techniques as part of an organization-wide initiative at Indiana University Health, a large academic health center in Indiana. Randy was COO and CFO at IU Health North Hospital, a medium-sized hospital in Carmel, Indiana, and CFO of IU Health Tipton Hospital and IU Health Saxony Hospital, two smaller hospitals. These three, known collectively as the North Central region. IU Health introduced a standard strategic planning methodology cascaded from the system's strategic plan to each region and hospital, as well as tools to connect the local strategic plan to the local operational metrics. Observing that the improvement process itself was rather weak on empirical and rigorous data, Randy brought in a couple of industrial engineers, data analysts, and a simulation expert to form the regional business analytics team, which supported the operations in the region as they executed on the strategic plan. It became apparent that many of the tools and techniques had potential application beyond clinical and business operations, and over the course of 3 years, evolved a way to work on the work rather than just do the work. Randy received extensive guidance and support from a mentor who is also an industrial engineer on using these tools in this fashion. Randy subsequently coached about 15 individuals in the use of this way of thinking and believes it is a way to help people grow, build trust, and help everyone move towards using their full potential. Randy, if you're ready, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me mention before I get started that Beyond Benchmarks is affiliated with Kate Clark's company, Mosaic, relative to our revenue cycle work. I think a lot of you know her. She is, of course, the education chairperson for the AAHAM, and she got me involved in this, so I want to thank her for that, and you can all blame her for what follows. So here we go. So if you saw the intro or the flyer for the presentation, you saw the description. The idea here is to help you think about ways to create white space on your calendar, which would be unscheduled time to work on your work, to do other things that you don't have time to do now, or take on opportunities to grow and serve, okay? So one of the lenses you may want to view this in would be, how can you work less in the now and more in the future? And how can you become a better and more trusted leader by engaging your frontline folks, okay? So the objectives here, hopefully you have seen as well. This is a product of certain measurement and tracking tools, the efficient matching of resource and demand, and adjusting to change that we already use in improving our operations. So with that in mind, I'd been in that space for about 2 years before I applied it to my own leader standard work and personal development plan. And I want you also to know here, this is not an exhaustive study. It's only one man's journey applying some tools and techniques in kind of a weird way. But the tools do work in about any setting. So the examples themselves, don't get lost in the data. The examples themselves are only illustrative of the concepts and tools, which are really the main point. We'll revisit that a couple times. Okay? So a little about me. I have 3 very important whys, and here's the first one. I have standard work around my family, believe it or not. I'm a husband, a father, a grandfather, a brother. These on the left, you see our annual family pictures last year. While Colton, you see in the upper right-hand box, was still cooking. Really didn't take him long to foreshadow his career, as you can see. All the kids and grandkids live within 5 miles of us, so I need some white space because my wife is incredibly generous with our time, which I love. And I would note for any of you who aren't grandparents yet that grandfather is the only time you can choose your name. Most people blow it. I prefer Haldar the Magnificent, but no one is calling me that. So my second standard work is cycling. You can never have too many bikes. I have a friend with 19 bikes and a very cool spouse. He is the Imelda Marcos of bikes. But I do have structured work around my cycling as well as around my family. And then last but not least, as you would expect, I have standard work around my work. So we're really focused on operations improvement using not only process but data and matching resource with demand. Here's our website. Please visit it sometime. I've listed some of our clients here too, and we have a fairly eclectic mix of clients out there. So let's dive in here. So here's the first question. Are you responsible for less, the same, or more over time? What's been the trajectory of your work? And I'm guessing it's the third. So the second question, how do you reprioritize every time a new opportunity comes your way? You do reprioritize, don't you? But do you do it with intent or by default or both? I'm guilty of that, frankly. So there you go. And you know, the reason oops, thank you. I forgot to move the slide. This is the first one for my family time. Thank you guys very much. I'll let you catch up here. There was the one for the bicycle. That was the one for our standard work. And this is the one we're on now. So back to the presentation. So over time, we're responsible for more, right? Why emphasize evolve here? What we're going to be talking about is iterative. Your work will not stop changing. You shouldn't either. And the point is you'll change by default, if not by design. So here's kind of the key slide in the presentation. It's number 9, I think. And if you take nothing else away from this presentation, please take this. So this work, let me note, is additive at first. So it's under the notion of you have to spend time to save time, right? The old Abe Lincoln thing, if you give me 10 minutes to chop down a tree, I'll take 7 minutes to sharpen the axe. So we're going to dive into each one of these, but the big deal is they're kind of a little below the middle. The drop it, delegate it, do it better, in kind of a structured, trackable way. And it's an iterative process. So like any kind of investment, the payback is over time. The other thing that kind of makes it interesting is the whole notion of reflection before you iterate. So again, don't get too hung up on the data, but try to connect the dots back to the process here, okay? So what would a reason be for taking action to change? And here are ones that we frequently hear. And you guys can add the ones to these that you personally, that personally drive you. But let's face it, people will do anything for a belief. If you connect what you do to a deeply held conviction, you can do amazing things. And as a side note, if you connect your people to a noble belief and then connect the work to what you're asking them to do, they can accomplish amazing things. So this is actually a bit off the direct path. we will follow today. However, the strength of the beginning frequently predicts the quality of the end. Okay? So let's move on to the first kind of busy slide, which I hope you can see here. And don't get too hung up on the data, but what I wanted to do was connect to something that was intrinsically important to me. In this instance, behavior needed to follow belief. And my coach had me start with this. This is how I believed I could best serve my 3 hospitals, my executive team, the rest of my executive team, and especially the people at the front line and ultimately our patients. So how can I have the greatest impact and work at the top of my capabilities? And it was to develop our people, hit our annual operating goals, and set us up for success into the future. So this was almost completely additive at first. So you'll notice we had different chunks of standard work. And then note the little blue section off to the left. We're going to visit that again. And I'll refer back to that in a little while. So some time reflections. The March hare, always late, reprioritizing in the moment rather than in a controlled, intentional way. You probably have already found all the big opportunities, right? However, the question is, are there some medium to small gains over a long period of time that if you invest some time in, you can find? And part of the underlying notion here, you've probably seen different definitions of standardized work. So just the highlighted section here is most important to what we're doing. It's highly defined work, define the content, and move on from there. You have to know where you are and have a strong idea of where you want to go and be able to measure and track progress as you go. Now, it's not as easy as it sounds. And frankly, a lot of folks that have come to me for coaching, I forgot to advance again. Standardized work. A lot of this is where they get hung up. So I want to show you a little clip about a definition of standardized work. Here you go. Trevor, could you run this for us, please?
Will do. On your screen, you should see the video pop up in just a few seconds. All right, back to you.
All right, thank you. So I think we can all agree that Peter knows his standard work, right? However, the description here isn't really detailed and nuanced, so we really don't know what drives it. We have a general notion that there might be some management issues here. But, why did Peter see his work through this lens, and why did he not feel the need to change? So might be some leadership issues. It's obviously fictional, but it might be somewhat familiar. You do have to admire his self-knowledge, though, and ability to define his standard work. So let's move into how do we measure this, okay? Love this quote, which, of course, I would, given the business I'm in. When I actually started measuring where I was spending my time, I was kind of surprised, but kind of not, as you'll see. Please remember that the measurement itself drive some empirical knowledge and behavior. So, I mean, that's just my expert opinion. So here's what I first tried to do to measure my own standard work. This is rather unattractive and rather uninformative. I manually track my work hours for like 4 to 6 weeks in a quarter in quarter-hour increments. So not very actionable. Started with 5 categories. Was not very good at it. One of the problems is when you try a new skill, it takes several iterations to master. So most managers, if they get past the first part, this is where they kind of don't progress. So here's my second time study, having learned from the first. And you'll notice that I have more categories, perhaps a little more actionable, that might give me a direction of where to go next. Okay, so if you take a look at how it lays out, there are kind of no surprises, but at least I've defined a starting point against which I can measure future states. Identified the size and scope of my biggest opportunities, which were, not surprising, email. There's the second one. And not surprisingly, the second iteration showed me that my greatest opportunities were in meetings and emails. Okay. It also showed me how much the opportunity was. And I could also see that each one probably had different approaches given the frequency and duration. So, and then, the last note, the blue, very light blue and pink are areas that I wanted to grow relative to the other ways. So, by the way, the emails were discrete email sessions, not when I was checking and answering emails in meetings, if that makes any difference. So let's run some experiments. And first, let's start with email. Okay, email can be very useful, enabling enhanced communications and consistency in messaging, provide quick clarifications. Yeah, I know that. But I still hate it with the passion of 1,000 burning suns. So here we go. We tried several things with the email experiments. You've probably tried some of these, right? First 3 bullets here, we worked as an executive team on these. And, more complete experiments are listed in this link if you want to review them at some time. Some things will work better than others, given your scope of responsibility and authority. But actually, the glory is in the effort, because trying new things like this actually changes how your brain works and how you see things. And one of the things you might want to ask yourself and share, if you guys have this capacity through your professional group, is, can you share ideas with each other on things like this? What have everybody found successful in managing emails, since it is a universal issue? So, unsurprisingly, this next led me to meetings, which I was amazed when I first got into the healthcare business, how much time is spent in meetings. And it turned out to be a lot more fertile ground for me than email in terms of my improvement process. So, redundant meetings. Here's an example or an experiment. So we had 2 manager meetings. You can see all of this. There's a lot of meaningless content. And a lot of my managers had already indicated, hey, can we get some time back? Are there ways we can do this? And several people actually suggested that we make the manager meetings more efficient and less frequent. I said, okay, let's give it a shot. And then the last item there, I actually had someone track the density of iPhone usage in some of our meetings. And if folks are on their iPhones mainly while you're making a presentation, I know how it makes me feel. So there you go. So we eliminated both of the leadership meetings. And two, we eliminated both leadership meetings and one of the two manager meetings. Vetted this with other executives and a bunch of leaders, and then pledged to make the remaining monthly meeting more relevant, more efficient, more actionable. Okay. So what happened was there was a little pushback about getting rid of some of these meetings, but it was noted that people were voting with their feet by not showing up since it wasn't mandatory, and then by voting with their thumbs. Here's kind of the key takeaway here. If you're going to delegate more, you need to give your employees more time back and permission for them to experiment, because we're going to get into the whole drop, delegate, and do better several times as we move through here. So of the remaining monthly manager meeting, we decided to delegate it. So it became of the people, for the people, by the people, rather than a bunch of executives just talking at people. We asked for volunteers to lead this, and we had some really dramatic response to this. There were folks that were very interested in doing this, so that's okay. So we kind of structured this in a different way, made it very predictable, very positive, very energizing. It took a little while for folks to get comfortable with all of this, but it really took off. There was a lot more focus on thankful and uplifting things in our work, and also on our key performance indicators and operating targets, and much more useful. So the second experiment we tried was with our executive team. I don't know how well you can see this, but again, the detail is less important than the study itself that informed us of our opportunities. So we had many executives at many meetings. And so note the calculations at the right. Question is, do we all need to be at the same meetings at the same times? So could we rotate attendance at some meetings and then report out at our weekly executive team meeting for 5 minutes what several of us would have been in a meeting for an hour or two? Could we read the minutes and pick up the important stuff, and just be visible when we needed to be visible, but when we don't be, we all get that time back. So obviously some of these meetings are required. We all had to go to board meetings. The chief medical officer had to go to a lot of the medical staff meetings. I had to go to the finance committee of the board. But as you can see here, the biggest chunk of our weekly meetings was in executive team meetings. No surprise. So we started with some data and wanted to measure how to improve. So just because I created this Pareto. Dominant item, obviously, was executive team meetings. So remember the blue standard work on the left side of slide 11 or whatever it was that I said we were going to revisit later? That target state is sort of what we ended up doing. And here it is. We had a more structured, focused approach, agreed upon a method of working. We had weekly, monthly, and quarterly standard work focused on our goals as they related to strategy and operations. Those were tracked and mentioned on the right there, but they were tracked visually, and you could actually see them when you were in the room. And there were defined time frames for each item to reduce pontifications, because when you get a lot of executives in the same room, there's a lot of talk going on. So these are the things we tried to do: drop, delegate, and do better. We had trackers to measure our progress on all of our strategic and operating goals. We kept score on a couple of major boards, one for strategy deployment, the other for operations improvement, and that drove our standard work. So it all seemed to come together as we started working on our joint standard work. So personally, here are some of the things that I did that oddly enough got spread across. Some of them got spread across the system. The NVA means non-value added. There were a lot of meetings that people wanted me to go to that really did nothing more than report out for things that I could either read or get elsewhere. Experimented with a lot of email improvements with the folks I sent the most emails to and then got emails from. I had more development time with my direct reports so they could accept more responsibility, and just a dozen other little things. So here's, this is kind of hard to read, but this is my third pass, and it's kind of the confirmed state. I ended up, after 1 year, time spent in general meetings decreased, time spent on emails decreased relative to my total time spent. And then the time spent on the activities for improvement and being at the front lines improved dramatically. So I pretty much got to where I wanted to go, but this work is iterative. And I keep forgetting to advance the slide. Sorry about that. This work is iterative, and it's actually never done. So a couple of final time reflections here. I started doing different things, working differently, and I actually changed how I looked at my work. I mean, at the end of the Matrix movie where Neo starts seeing the data streams rather than the implanted perception, it was kind of like that. Well, not exactly, but you get the idea. I started seeing things differently in my work than I had previously. So don't underestimate the power of reflection and written observations. You get little jolts of success, so you get that endorphin rush as you go through this stuff. And it was all, quite satisfying. So ran through that fairly quickly, and I recognized I was immersed in this. And I hope some of the kind of the higher level stuff came across here. So I'm going to pause at this point, and before we get into personal development plans, kind of wanted to know if there are any questions or anything you wanted me to cover at this point. If not, I'll wait till the end. Okay. Hearing none, we're going to move on to personal development plans. Okay. So you should really develop yourself so you can more effectively develop others. And, quite honestly, one of our more lasting contributions is to help other people grow and change. So this, I think, should be paired with your leader standard work. So it's kind of a holistic approach, if you believe it, which I do. There's clearly an overlap, and it works better when it's iterative. So your leader standard work can inform your personal development plan. Your personal development plan can certainly help you with your leader standard work. And if you keep in mind that it's largely driven by respect for people, it works even better. So with regard to my personal development plan, here was my my reason to focus my passion here. And as you can see, it's very operational. But I wanted to apply different rigor through the standard work and also through my personal development plan. Okay, so you start with an assessment piece. And again, the data isn't as important as knowing that you look at yourself and see where can I improve. In this particular tool, I assessed myself, had my coach assess me, a peer, someone who, and also someone who reported to me, to decide where maybe I should start with my own development. So this is where I ended up. You got to start somewhere, right? And these are the ways I thought I could improve most by these 6 dimensions. So you can see the different fish bones. Of note is the human develop one. It's difficult to develop people if you're not developing yourself. You can't be passionate unless they are. It's kind of a universal thing, okay? So, with regard to my own personal development that came out of that fishbone, here are my starting metrics. They were tracked across a year to inform what was hardwired and what needed to be improved. Categories, again, are less important. Yours are going to be different than mine, rather than the intentionality of the tool. So I just track everything. There were sub-trackers here. I tracked which departments I visited, how often, to spread my visibility, and tried to focus on those who needed the most coaching and encouragement. I wrote book reviews of the books I read so others could read my abstracts, and it turned out to be a fairly powerful experience. And then, like everything else, I ran some experiments. What are we going to try? And then tracked the actions that were a function of those experiments. So these are all the actions, again, a little more detail than you need, but it's part of the whole gestalt here. The last section was in brown. I hope you can read it, is the most interesting, because by the time we got to this point, several of our folks that were not necessarily my direct reports were interested in broadening the scope of their responsibilities. And consequently, they came to me and asked to take certain things off my plate that helped them increase their own scope. And that was very cool and also unexpected. So finally, I did capture some reflections off each one of these iterations. And again, the data might not look that impressive to you. However, if you're going to work on the work and on yourself, you need to take time to reflect. Try to think through root causes in your next iteration. It also helps to have someone to work with, your peers, direct reports, whomever. As you're working on your own work in your own personal development, transparency with peers and direct reports can be extraordinarily powerful. And I don't know if you've ever had a boss that ask you to help him or her improve their own performance from your perspective and really mean it. How did that make you feel? I mean, trusted, strong, capable. It's extraordinary. So, kind of a little side note is, as you're working on your own personal development, remember, it's not just about you, because it's a team. You have different tribes that you belong to, and to the extent that you can integrate them into your own development, it can be incredibly rewarding. And so these were kind of some esoteric things we decided to measure to see if we were really developing ourselves and developing a fully engaged culture. Where we scored ourselves as a team, we had some definitions, or we had some discussion around these, and then assigned champions for each one of these to make sure we were developing I know it sounds weird, but spiritually as a team, and I use that in a way that's more around the work than anything metaphysical. Oops. So here are some final reflections here. This isn't the last slide, it's just some final reflections. In my leader standard work, I wanted to create more time to understand what the work was that was driving our metrics and to spend more time where the work was actually being done. So some of the things I got to do was assemble patient trays, deliver trays to patient rooms. Our food and nutrition folks were very, very proud about all the changes they were making there to improve service, time, quality. Got to work with our housekeeping staff. We actually had them measure their own work, and they were, once we defined some standard definitions of what the work was and how long it should actually take, what their cycle time was, what their tact time had to be, it was revealed that they needed more staff. So we added some staff, and it paid it off immediately. We reduced overtime to nothing. Turnover dropped almost to nothing. And those were two of our huge costs in those areas. So it's difficult to manage change. It really is. And, you know, visibility really builds trust in this situation, I believe. And I know some of you are probably quite good at that as well. And remember, we're talking about small to medium improvements. We're talking about critical thinking. And we're talking about sustainment, because sustainment is such a pain. Anytime you make a change, whether it's in your own behavior or in a process, things tend to, I think this is one of Newton's laws, that return to its beginning state. So that's why you need to make it visual, what your changes are, where you want to be and where you want to go next. And lastly, as we've mentioned several times, it has to be intentional and deeply committed. So basically what we've done here is talked about a baseball field and the rules, okay? So there are dimensions to the baseball field and between the bases from home plate to pitcher's mound and so on and so forth. And there are definitely innings and other rules. But within that, there's a lot of creativity that can be done. And, you know, the positions players play, batting order, pitching rotations. And so within what we've talked about today, there are unlimited uses for this, not just, you know, with leader standard work, personal development plans, but, you know, I keep forgetting to advance the slides for that. I apologize. There are, you know, infinitely creative ways you can use these tools, not just in leader standard work and personal development plans. So finally, power of belief. People will do anything for an idea or belief. This is absolutely true. The other thing is a lot of folks that, you know, I talk to about this don't believe it can help, and quite possibly it can't. So, I mean, if you're not passionate about it, if you don't want to try something new, it may indeed not be worth your time. But on the other hand, I've had several people who invested their time in this and really made some significant, dramatic improvements. So spending more time to gain more time. And as with any investment, time is your friend. So that concludes my prepared remarks. I apologize for not advancing the slides along with my conversation. So I'm sure that's going to turn up in the survey. So I do apologize for that. Thank you for your attention and allowing me to do this. And thanks, Kate, for inviting me, and Michael Lombardo and Trevor for technical support. And if you would, please visit our website, or feel free to contact me if you want to learn more, launch your own journey. So at this point, I feel like I see that I have a couple of questions pop up. Okay, here's the first one. Why the name Beyond Benchmarks? So it had largely to do with recognizing that benchmarks are a great way to get some clues as to where to improve your work or your operations. However, kind of limited in understanding root causes. So you have to find out what's, before you to move a metric, you have to understand what's defining it. So the classic example was, of course, which I would imagine if any of you are involved in the healthcare field, the old mortality index, which CMS used to score hospitals relative to each other, publish those results so you can be publicly embarrassed. And part of the way that hospitals get paid, the basic calculation was obviously observed mortalities over expected mortalities. And most folks wanted to try to move the numerator, observed mortalities, which is a very noble thing to do. But the thing that moved the metric was expected, because what moved that turned out to be not the coding, but the documentation in the charts. So you had to go all the way back to the documentation, and then why was the documentation not as good as it could be? And it turned out to be a lot of understanding of why it was important, a lot of technology, because we were putting a lot of burden on clinicians that didn't need to be. And frankly, once you got some of those things sorted out, made it easier for the clinicians, put in some screening tools to help with it, you could get the mortality index closer to what it was supposed to be. So hope that wasn't too technical, but that's one of the reasons. Benchmarking is fine, but it doesn't get you where you want to go in terms of actionable behavior. So email, please share some ideas. So let's go back to that slide. This is the one where you can spend an awful lot of time working on things, and unless a lot of people follow all the rules all the time, you're not going to have much success, okay? So here we go. We do know that the average employee spends about 2 to 6 hours on email every day. Okay, that's average, some more. So some of the things we experimented with as a team, and I emphasize that because you can't deal with all email problems with all times, at all times with simple rules. However, you can do some batching, and that's what that first bullet is. A lot of people batch their emails so that they have specific times to work on emails. I don't know if you do this while you're on vacation, but for me, I check them morning and afternoon, and let people know before I go on vacation that that's when I'm checking them. Now, if my boss wants me, he or she usually calls me, and I make that exception, but that's one of the things you can try. Email etiquette, again, with peers and direct reports. So reply to all. Do you have to reply to all? That takes some judgment. Some people get kind of irritated about being left out of the loop. I don't a lot of times. So that's something you can experiment with. Say, okay, you don't have to respond to all in certain instances. So let's try that. I know people who filter their emails, so newsletters automatically go to certain subfolders, or they have certain other emails that are easily grouped that go into subfolders, and then you can kind of assign relative importance to those and work on the ones that are most important or have the most likelihood of improving something first, okay? And there are just a ton of experiments. If you have some time, click on that link and kind of roll through some of those. And something might catch your eye that you can try. But again, this is something that's so ubiquitous and so nuanced that it's really hard. It depends on your span of control, alignment of your team around this, and a number of other things that aren't specifically directly controllable, but there's a lot of glory in the effort. So, Judy, I hope that kind of helped. And if not, there are a lot of resources out there. And in fact, your professional association might have some. So the next one, tips for getting a developing supervisor to delegate. Oh my gosh, how often have we heard that? Yes. How do developing supervisors define their value? By doing everything, right? They don't want to make any mistakes. They don't want to make you feel like they're doing less than an adequate job. And honestly, this is one of the things we're working with a client right now. It's a marketing firm. They've got some new managers that they're so terrified of having a mistake slip through that they're not delegating very effectively or efficiently. So we're working with them on that. And the owner of the company has made it quite clear that, okay, let's develop our people. And to the extent that certain things slip through, let's track what's slipping through and then get to the why, because nobody comes in with bad intentions or saying, hey, I want to do a crappy job today. But a lot of it comes back to, do we give people an opportunity to explore what they can delegate? And then if some things slip through, to look at it unemotionally and say, okay, what can we put in place to remove the barriers in a logical way? I feel your pain on this one. It's one of the things that new supervisors deal with, but some direct coaching, clarifying your expectations, helping them track what they're going to do, what they're going to delegate, and by when they're going to delegate it, and then holding each other accountable to that, and just keeping open dialogue is the best I can tell you. And once again, there are probably people on this call that are much better at that than me. Those are mine. So here's one. Have you had experience with constraints management when developing performance improvement initiatives? Absolutely. Somebody's been reading the goal here. Yeah, clearly the whole notion is you hit one barrier, you solve that and move on to the next one. And my guess is, since you are informed enough to ask this question, you also know how to address it, which is have a logical and structured way to remove barriers and move on to the next. It's iterative, and yes, absolutely. It comes in over and over and over again for performance improvement initiatives. And you just have to be patient, right? You just have to be thoughtful and keep trying things, experimenting with different things. So, oh, absolutely. This is classic of what we see. So I have a question here. Can you offer resources or templates for time studies and or self-assessments that would be useful? Your professional association might be able to. The examples you saw here were kind of homegrown. we had a really good coach that brought in some examples from actually the manufacturing industry that he'd seen used. Um, and that is something you may have to search yourself. You can look at the ones I put out there, but I don't imagine they're going to be really too relevant to your work. But maybe the concepts might be what I tried to measure about myself or about my work or about my own development. So I do not have real good templates at this time. Sure, they exist though. Thank you for the comment. Attack the tyranny of perfectionism. Absolutely. Don't let, perfect get in the way of good, because good is where your growth comes from. Perfect, obviously, you want to aspire to that. But certainly if you're landing airplanes for a living, a success rate of 99% isn't very good. But if you're hitting baseballs, a failure rate of 66% is excellent. Right, thank you. Give people some grace to grow and experiment. Absolutely. Thank you. What else do we have here? So, Trevor, it appears that we may have reached the end of our presentation here. Do you need to take it back at this point?
That sounds like a plan. On behalf of AAHAM, I'd like to thank everyone for joining today, and also a big thank you to Randy for the excellent presentation. I'd now like to direct your attention to the survey that will appear on your screen. If everyone could take a moment to fill out the survey, we appreciate your feedback. This concludes today's session. To end, you may simply hang up. Have a great day.